So you've almost made it. It's the next to the last talk of the symposium. So you've nearly done it. So first I'd like to say thanks to Midas for this opportunity to come and talk to you all today. I appreciate the opportunity. And thanks to all of you for sticking around here at the tail end. So I took the call for AI journeys a bit literally. I decided to kind of expand on my personal experience with my kind of first initial encounters with machine learning in my domain and what I've been doing with it since then and how it's kind of shaped my career. That was my kind of interpretation of the call for the AI journeys presentations. Yeah, so I'm on the research faculty here at the University of Michigan, and I've taken a little bit of a circuitous path to get here, as many academics do. Just to give you some context for, where I came from, did my PhD in oceanography out at Colorado State University, and yeah, you can do oceanography in Colorado. It's totally fine. You don't have to be next to the ocean to do oceanography. In fact, it's so big that being right next to it doesn't really help you that much. So it's all good. You can still study it. I worked as a research scientist at Georgia Tech for a little while. And then I spent 10 years as a physical oceanographer over at the British Antarctic Survey in Cambridge. A little less than 2 years ago, I ended up joining the research faculty here. And that represented a bit of a shift for me. I went from oceanography to Great Lakes science. And it's been really, really interesting to have that shift. But I'm going to start out by telling you a little bit about oceanography and how I came about, how I started to use some of these machine learning tools, how I first got exposed to them. Yeah, so what you're looking at here, this is a map of a bunch of robotic profiling floats in the ocean. There were a little over 4,000 of them in the ocean a couple of days ago. This is nearly up to date here. And the robotic profiling floats look like what you're seeing here in the bottom left. And by the way, if you ever get the chance, please don't throw them in the ocean like this. It's probably going to be fine, but you're really supposed to put them in a bit more gently than that. Not really just supposed to chuck them over the side of your boat. So yeah, here's the position of all of these floats right now. This program, the Argo float program, has been going on for a couple of decades. They've been taking, now, we have millions and millions of profiles of ocean temperature and salinity and sometimes biogeochemical variables as well. And this has really revolutionized oceanography. This has been huge. Prior to this, you'd have to rely on individual ship tracks to get information about the subsurface ocean. The satellites, remote sensing can only tell you so much. You can get a lot of information about the surface ocean, but you can't get very much information about the interior ocean without measuring it directly. You get a lot of information that looks like this. This is a collection of Argo float profiles, specifically in the Southern Ocean. So that's geographically what you're looking at here. And the question then becomes, okay, I have this really large set of profiles. Here you've got pressure, which is a way to deal with depth in the ocean. That's the vertical coordinate here. So the higher the pressure, the deeper down you are in the ocean. On the horizontal axis here, you've got temperature that you're measuring. And you can see the general trend of warmer near the surface and cooler in the interior. That makes sense. But you also see kind of interesting potential groups here where it's actually colder at the surface and warmer at the subsurface, which is interesting. Those locations, we call them salt stratified profiles because there's a salinity gradient, salt gradient, that lets this profile be stable despite the fact that it's colder water sitting on top of warmer water. Okay, so the question is, you have this big collection of profiles. What do you do with it? Well, here's how I got involved with machine learning. It was pretty simple, actually. I feel like I was just in the right place at the right time, and I saw an opportunity. So some researchers in a paper, Guillaume Mazet 2017 is the reference there, they applied unsupervised classification to this big set of Argo profiles. They started in the North Atlantic specifically. And I was just kind of thinking why don't we just do that same thing in the Southern Ocean? Really simple idea, right? This is just geographically shifting things over a little bit. It was the perfect kind of project for a summer student researcher, right? That's the sort of thing you already have an example where this sort of analysis has been done. You just need to shift to a different geographic region. So that's a project you can really carve out really nicely for a summer student. That's something where if you get a great student, they're going to be able to knock that out and maybe even go beyond that because you've already got a lot of the methodology kind of established. You're not trying to invent a whole new approach. You're just trying it in a new region. We picked Gaussian Mixture Modeling. That's become a favorite of mine. Gaussian Mixture Modeling is really flexible. Some of you in the room will be familiar with it, and you'll know that GMM is a way to try to represent a distribution in some kind of abstract feature space using a bunch of multi-dimensional Gaussian functions. You can let the ellipsoids rotate the covariance structure to try to represent that covariance statistically. It's got a relatively shallow learning curve, which makes it, a good one to start. There's a really nice scikit-learn package that will let you get started with this. Also, one of the things I like about GMM, it gives you this posterior probability information. You get information about, it's not quite a confidence measure. It's a little bit not right to say confidence, but it's something kind of adjacent to that where you're getting a sense of how clean the classification is. Results. So I got a really great summer student, Harry Holt, who is now done a PhD in space sciences over at the University of Surrey. And this is what he came up with over that summer project. So we identified using GMM that you could represent the structure of temperature profiles around the Southern Ocean using this 8-class structure. And these are just the means and standard deviations of the temperature profiles in each one of the classes. So, we don't have to spend a ton of time talking about each one of these, but there's the salt stratified class. These two, actually, class 1 and class 2, that has that salt stratification that we kind of could just about pick out by eye in the first plot I showed you. Well, one of the first plots I showed you. Here's what it looks like if you take those groups, those classes, and you put them onto this two-dimensional spatial map of the Southern Ocean around Antarctica. Here you've got Antarctica in the center, South America, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand there. And these are fronts. These are positions where it's kind of been derived from various satellite fields and other measurements where we'd, on average, expect to find sharp transitions there in those regions. And we were really encouraged to see that these groups, these classes that GMM identified, seem to line up pretty well, reasonably well, with the classes that with these fronts, with these frontal regions. And it's not perfect, but you wouldn't expect it to be because in reality the fronts move around a little bit and there's going to be some amount of mixing. So we were really encouraged by this. There's spatially coherent structures in here, including circumpolar structures, and this is what you might call a gyre, the subpolar gyre in the South Pacific. Yeah, so that was great. We withheld spatial information from GMM. We didn't tell it anything about where these profiles were located. We asked it to derive these groups just based on the structure. So that was great. What made this possible? Well, for one thing, all the Argo data is open, publicly accessible, right? So that's really important. Having just access to open data that's already been through some amount of quality control, that's already really well structured, that was super important. We also used open source machine learning tools. That's important. That helped us get started quickly. So open source software is really important there. Of course, we needed funding, right? We needed institutional support for pilot projects like summer research students, and we needed that institutional support. And of course, we also needed a fantastic student, and we were really lucky to find one. We expanded on this over the years. I did this research with my PhD student where we used the probabilistic information, that posterior information that you get from GMM, to try to redefine fronts a little bit. There's a kind of recent trend in oceanography where we're trying to kind of rethink or broaden that concept of what do we mean by a front exactly. And here we used GMM as a way to define kind of a probabilistic boundary between fronts. We used that posterior probability information to get that, and came up with this quantity called the I metric. We worked with a really great computer scientist named Anita Fowle, who, really helped us think about this and make it concrete. Another thing you can do, I'm just giving you some examples of the sort of things that you can do with GMM, the sort of applications that we tried out. This one, I really love this area. There's a really great computer scientist named Micah Sonnewald. She's over at UC Davis. She's an oceanographer, but also a computer scientist. And she came up with this method where you use unsupervised classification to identify regions of balance between different terms in the carbon budget, right? So you've got a surface carbon budget that's determined by things like advection and diffusion. Maybe you've got air-sea exchange, and there's going to be different places in the ocean where there's different balances between, different combinations of those terms. So each one of those terms is a feature, is a dimension in your clustering analysis. It's genius. I get so excited talking about it. She did it. She blew everything open thinking about it that way. So you can identify, you can make these maps like we did with this surface carbon data, to try to identify in a data-driven way regimes where you had similar balances between terms in the surface budget. What did we do next? Okay, so these were some pilot projects, some kind of initial seed projects. Together with a colleague, Scott Hosking, we started to expand this. We kind of built on this. We had weekly AI coffee. That was important, just kind of getting people together to discuss, what's going on, how could we use these methods. We did collaborative workshops with domain scientists and machine learning experts. Midas is doing a lot of this here, right? You're going to look at this list and say, hey, Midas is doing a lot of this. Yeah, it's true. We did joint MS, PhD projects with the University of Cambridge. There's a long relationship between the British Antarctic Survey and Cambridge there. Journal clubs, code review sessions, all these sorts of things are great. And of course, the people, Scott Hosking in this case, was really central to driving that forward. That established what we call the BASS Artificial Intelligence Lab, the BASS AI Lab. So it was growing. And when things really kicked off is when we were able to partner with a master's level researcher from the Department of Engineering. His name's Tom Anderson. His name is here. And Tom Anderson, in his brief couple of years with us, produced two genuinely useful tools for oceanography. The first one is IceNet, a sea ice forecasting approach that uses machine learning, uses deep learning. As inputs, you give it things like temperature measurements and wind measurements and spatial information, and you give it the kind of current state of the ice, and it gets passed through a UNet, convolutional UNet approach, and predicts what is the sea ice in the Arctic going to look like. This approach ended up performing really well and became kind of a flagship application for the AI lab. This is just really briefly one of the accuracy metrics here. SEAS is a big, it's kind of a benchmark for us. It's a collection, it's like an ensemble of approaches. And you can see here that IceNet, well, it couldn't beat the benchmark on the 1 month, but going out to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it was beating that benchmark, going out several months, which is what you're looking at on the horizontal axis. You're looking at several months into the future on that. This ended up getting some coverage. It ended up getting some media coverage and was boosted, in that way. So that increased the visibility of it a little bit. But importantly, all of this software was made available in an open source format. So it's kind of, this led to the BASS AI lab. And now this lab is, they do a number of things. And I won't read off all of these. I think I'm running a little bit low on time, so I won't read off all of these. But, you can go look at their website and see what they all get up to. Since moving here, I've started to think about, well, how could we use some of those tools that were built, with at the BASS AI lab here, and that's kind of what I'm transitioning into now. Tom Anderson built a tool called Deep Sensor, which is a convolutional, Gaussian neural process approach to modeling, to representing a set of spatiotemporal fields and also in situ measurements. You can blend those together with Deep Sensor. And long story short, you can fit this, convolutional Gaussian neural process model. That's one part of this whole framework. But Deep Sensor also uses active learning to indicate where new information, new sensors would be really helpful for clamping down on the uncertainty, on reducing the uncertainty. In Tom Anderson's paper here, he explored the sensor placement problem where these the circles are existing stations, existing air temperature measurement stations over Antarctica, and the pluses, those are places where additional information would be really useful for constraining this model. So you can use that as a kind of observing system tool. So yeah, like I mentioned, I came here a little under 2 years ago, and I'm really just getting started. I'm really still spinning up. I'm learning a lot about Great Lakes science, and we're trying to spin up the Great Lakes AI Lab, something which we hope will take off in a similar way that the Bass AI Lab did. So because I don't know any better, I'm just starting the same way. I'm like, well, let's start with small student projects, and let's use those to build up to larger and larger projects, and I'm hoping we can scale up, and maybe a similar thing will happen for our Great Lakes AI Lab. I won't go into the details here, but I had a summer fellow work with us this past summer, and they did a great job on, this is the first deep sensor application in the Great Lakes that's ever been done, and they did a great job helping to put that together. Got a really good student from UC Berkeley, Aaron Redding, to do that. Last slide. Yeah, so what do we need to make this same kind of scaling up happen, right? The Bass AI Lab stuff, I really feel like I was in the right place at the right time, and I just went along with it, and I said, this seems cool and interesting. This seems like something that could be really fun to explore and really useful. But what do you need? I think these are 6 of the things we need. I'm sure there's more things, but in my mind, these are some of the things that helped that Bass effort go from a small seed to something large. We do need lots of open analysis-ready data. The analysis-ready part's important. If it's not ready to go, then obviously you've got a lot of pre-processing ahead of you. Open source software that you can build on, you can learn from and build on, and then share with a wider ecosystem. You need social professional meetings like this. I think this is a great example of a social professional meeting to help things get going. You need really great students and postdocs. You need that institutional support too. You need funding, but also support for building these kind of pilot programs. And most importantly, of course, you've got to have people. You've got to have people who are really interested in this stuff, who are curious and driven and collaborative. And I think we have a lot of this, here at Michigan. So I'm excited about the possibilities, and I'm excited about that potential. Okay, great. Well, that's all from me. So I'll stop there and see if we'd like to talk about anything else. Any questions?
See one question.
So I'm curious why you use deep learning for your applications when they are known to require lots of data and are often non-interpretable, when there are plenty of other machine learning methods that have lower sample complexity and are more interpretable. Did you consider alternatives?
Yes. The example of trying out deep sensor is we do have a fair amount of remotely sensed surface temperature data. So that's a good example of a data set where we actually do have a fair amount of that. And there are other cases. We were talking about one earlier today.
My point is that no matter how much data you have, if you use a method that has lower sample complexity, that does better with less data, then it will get more, unless it's got some real limitations, like naive Bayes, right? Can't represent some things. But there are other techniques that like boosted decision trees might be more effective. Did you consider other approaches?
We've got people doing that, yeah. We're exploring a range of approaches.
Okay, that's good. That's what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
What about interpretability?
Yeah, that's...
To your customers.
So where we can get that's important, right? We want to be able to have hypotheses that we can think about and test. So, for example, we have a colleague who's been using BART, the Bayesian additive autoregressive, what does that stand for? I've forgotten. Regression trees. And that method to look at the drivers of harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, for example. And that way, that method gives you, a chance.
Then you have a healthy diversity within your lab, and that's good news. I just wanted to encourage everyone to take that kind of approach. Just for the record, you can use neural nets to produce interpretable models, but you have to put strong constraints on them, and that's seldom done because it's not popular. The rhetoric in that community is, we got to learn everything from the data. And then they'll say, but no, we can put something in the regularization term. but usually that's pretty opaque. And so there are ways to constrain them so that they're interpretable, but it's not a common philosophy.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
Thank you.
I had a question over here about, it was just a little thing on your slide, but you said there was code review at the Arctic group. How do you get scientists interested in like a regular social, fun code review?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I fully know how it happened, but we just started hosting it. But I think one of the things that helped was some of the students we were bringing in, for example, they had a bit more of that software background, that machine learning background, to where that was kind of a normal thing for them. So you kind of open that up and make it open to everybody and interdisciplinary, and people got curious about it and started attending. And then we would kind of just go through each other's Jupyter notebooks, for example, and just look at certain, go line by line and see, how does this work? How does this? I found an error in one of my Jupyter notebooks that way, just in one of the code reviews. So it was super useful. Yeah. So I think maybe just having a bit of that interdisciplinary mixture could be good. Maybe that helps encourage things.
Other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Dani. This was really interesting.